You were taught that playing fair is a virtue, that honesty is a strategy, that if you work hard, stay kind, and keep your head down, the world will eventually reward you. That is the most dangerous lie ever fed to a compliant mind. Right now, while you sit here watching this, someone less intelligent than you is commanding rooms. Someone with half your competence is running organizations. Someone who has done nothing to earn it is wearing the respect you have been waiting your whole life to receive. And the reason is not talent. It is not luck. It is not even connections. It is because they understand something Niccolo Machiavelli understood 5 centuries ago, something that modern society has worked very hard to scrub from your psychology. The world does not run on fairness. It runs on power. And power has rules. Cold, ruthless, precise rules. Everything they told you about being likable, being agreeable, being the bigger person, that is the exact reason you are losing. If you are not ready to hear this, close the video. Go back to the crowd. But if you want to know the truth that the dangerous ones already know, stay. Because what follows does not flatter you. It frees you. Phase 1. Fairness is a cage built for the obedient. Fairness does not exist in nature. It exists in contracts between parties who have agreed to pretend it does. The moment one party stops pretending, the contract dies. And it dies alone, silently, while you are still honoring it. The average person has spent decades being trained into fairness. School, church, family, every institution that needed your cooperation conditioned you to wait your turn, share your resources, and accept your portion without complaint. That conditioning did not make you noble. It made you predictable. And predictable people are easy to exploit. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince, "Men should be either treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries. For heavy ones, they cannot." This is not a moral statement. It is a behavioral observation. When you wound someone slightly, they recover and retaliate. When the response is total, they accept the reality and recalibrate. The mistake the conditioned man makes is the half measure. He gives soft pushback to hard aggression. He sets watery boundaries with people who only respect iron. He negotiates with those who only understand ultimatums. And so he produces the worst possible outcome. He appears weak enough to attack, but present enough to annoy. Napoleon understood this. When he moved against a rival, he moved decisively. Delay, in his view, was indecision dressed as strategy. The battlefield does not reward the man who hesitates to protect the feelings of his opponent. The practical instruction is this: stop reciprocating with those who do not reciprocate. Not with anger, with strategy. When someone demonstrates they do not operate by the rules you assumed were mutual, revise your behavior immediately. Withdraw access. Redirect energy. Do it without announcement, without drama, without a speech. Simply stop. The person who needed to play fair with you was never a partner. They were a drain, wearing the costume of one. What happens when you stop playing fair with those who never did? The next phase answers that. Phase 2. Ruthlessness is not rage. It is discipline. You have been taught to confuse ruthlessness with cruelty, with outbursts, with cold-blooded hostility. That confusion benefits everyone who wants you to remain controllable. True ruthlessness is not an explosion. It is a temperature, the coldest kind. It is the mind that feels the fury and files it, then acts from logic, not from wound. The emotionally reactive person is, psychologically speaking, the most manipulable creature in any room. Anyone who knows which lever to pull can make them perform on command. Embarrass them in public, and they explode. Ignore them, and they chase. Flatter them, and they capitulate. They have handed the controls of their behavior to anyone willing to press buttons. The psychologically sovereign individual does something different. They recognize emotion as data. The anger tells them something. The hurt tells them something. But the response is chosen, not triggered. Robert Greene, in the 48 Laws of Power, crystallizes this as Law 38. Think as you like, but behave like others. Concealment of reaction is a form of armor. The man who cannot be read cannot be controlled. Machiavelli himself demonstrated this during his own fall. Stripped of his position in the Florentine government, arrested, tortured on the strappado, his shoulders dislocated from his own weight, he did not break. He did not rage publicly. He retreated to his farm, and in that exile calculated. The Prince was written not in triumph, but in cold, disciplined silence. From a dungeon of circumstances, he authored the most dangerous political manual in Western history. The discipline looks like this in practice. When someone attacks your reputation, the weak man argues. The sovereign man pauses, 5 seconds in silence, assesses what response would be most strategically damaging to the attacker and most elevating to himself. Then he acts once and does not return to the subject. One clean cut. No drama, no rematch. Because the moment you can no longer be emotionally hijacked, you become something the crowd cannot handle. You become unpredictable, and unpredictable people are respected because they cannot be farmed for reaction. The next phase reveals what fills the space where desperation used to live. Phase 3. Dominance replaces likability. You are still here. Good. The fragile ones already left. Now hear this, because it will dismantle years of programming in a single breath. Being liked is a leash. Likable people are safe. They absorb disrespect and smile through it, because their greatest fear is the withdrawal of approval. They say yes when they mean no. They tolerate what they should not tolerate. They make themselves available to be used, because availability is how they signal their worth. Psychologically dominant people are not safe. They are not trying to be. They have made peace with the discomfort others feel when a boundary is firm. Dr. Robert Cialdini's research on influence identifies social proof and liking as two of the most powerful compliance triggers. But they are triggers for those being led, not those leading. The sovereign individual does not optimize for liking. He optimizes for respect. And respect, unlike liking, does not require him to make himself smaller. Machiavelli was surgical on this. It is much safer to be feared than loved if one has to lack one of the two. Not feared through violence, feared through consequence. Through the unmistakable sense that this person has standards, that those standards will be enforced, and that crossing them has costs the other party did not budget for. Cosimo de' Medici built the most powerful banking dynasty in Renaissance Europe not through generosity alone, but through calculated selective generosity. He gave to those who served his interests. he withheld from those who did not. The city of Florence did not love him the way they loved a friend. They respected him the way men respect a force that can be with you or against you. The practical shift is this. Stop asking, "Will they like me if I do this?" Begin asking, "Does this action increase or decrease my position?" Dominance is not cruelty. It is selectivity. It is being the person whose approval others seek rather than seeking theirs. Build that position or stay comfortable being harvested. Phase 4. One strong move outweighs 100 weak ones. Comment below. I move in silence. The man who makes threats he does not follow is not feared. He is trained around. Every empty warning you issue is a lesson you teach, that your words have no weight, that they can be absorbed without consequence, that you are noise. The psychologically dominant individual makes fewer moves, but when he moves, the impact is disproportionate, final, and remembered. Research in behavioral economics, specifically the work of Daniel Kahneman on loss aversion, confirms this. Humans are more deeply affected by losses than by equivalent gains. A single decisive consequence registers more powerfully in the psyche than 100 minor frictions. You do not need to punish constantly. You need to punish memorably once. Machiavelli wrote, "If an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared." The man who half strikes invites the counterattack. The man who ends the matter ends the matter. Julius Caesar understood this not in war alone, but in the Senate. His silence in the right moment conveyed more threat than any speech. When he finally acted, crossing the Rubicon, it was not a warning. It was a declaration. He had been calculating for years. He moved once. It changed the known world. In practice, stop explaining, stop warning, stop hoping the other party will finally understand. When the pattern of disrespect has been established and documented in your mind, respond once, strategically, publicly, if necessary, disproportionate enough to the pattern, and do not revisit it. Do not explain your reasoning. Strong moves do not require commentary. The next revelation concerns something more invisible and more dangerous than any single action. Phase 5. Perception is the battlefield. Most people believe the world responds to who they are. The world responds to who it believes they are. These are not the same thing, and the distance between them is where power lives. Social psychology established the concept of the halo effect, the cognitive bias documented by psychologist Edward Thorndike, where one dominant positive trait causes observers to assume other positive traits are present. Enter a room with commanding posture, controlled movement, and deliberate eye contact, and before you have spoken a word, the room has already made a decision about you. It has assigned you a rank. The man who waits for his value to be discovered will wait indefinitely. The man who engineers the conditions under which his value is perceived will not wait at all. Machiavelli was absolute. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. For those few, you can reveal something real. For the rest, which is most rooms you will ever walk into, appearance is the whole game. The Knights Templar understood this at a structural level. Their white mantles, their disciplined silence in public, their deliberate mystery, all engineered to create the perception of an organization that could not be opposed. That perception was the fortress. The actual military capacity was secondary.
Manage your narrative before others manage it for you. Share your wins strategically. Maintain silence on your weaknesses. Build proximity to those whose status reflects onto you. Project certainty even in uncertainty, because certainty is contagious, and its absence is disqualifying. Your image is not vanity. It is infrastructure. Phase 6. Control the story or become a character in someone else's. Every conflict has a narrator. The narrator decides what it meant. The narrator decides who was right. The narrator decides what the audience remembers. If that narrator is not you, you have already lost the psychological war, regardless of what actually happened.
Robert Greene articulates this in The 33 Strategies of War. The battle for minds is won before the physical confrontation begins, through pre-framing, through controlling the story that shapes the perception of events before they unfold. King Philip IV of France destroyed the Knights Templar not through military victory, but through narrative. He framed them as heretics, as sodomites, as enemies of God. The accusations were fabricated. The story was the weapon. Once the story took hold, the military operation was formality. When you are attacked, socially, professionally, personally, your first obligation is not defense. It is reframing. Not what happened, but what the meaning of what happened is. The person who cuts contact with a toxic figure who is already painting them as abandonment must get ahead of the narrative, not with excuses, but with pre-positioned framing that makes their decision legible as self-respect rather than betrayal. Practical instruction. Anticipate how your most significant decisions will be described by those with reason to paint them poorly. Then construct a simple, dignified, value-laden framing and deliver it first. Not defensively, declaratively. The man who controls the story shapes the world others live in. Phase 7. Systems replace personality. Systems scale. When your authority depends on your mood, your energy, or your willingness to enforce it in the moment, your authority is fragile. It can be worn down through repetition. It can be manipulated through your emotional state. It can be negotiated with because you are negotiating with yourself. Systems cannot be negotiated with. The Stoic tradition, documented extensively through Marcus Aurelius, identifies personal sovereignty as the ability to respond from principle rather than from reaction. But Machiavelli takes this further. The wise ruler builds structures that enforce themselves. When someone consistently wastes your time, you do not confront them. You quietly become unavailable when they need you. Not as punishment, as a natural outcome of your priorities. Those who respect your time get access to your time. Those who do not get the natural consequence of your absence. Implemented systematically, this is invisible. It does not require your anger. It does not require your involvement. It does not require a speech. The behavior toward you determines the access to you, and this operates as quietly as gravity. This is ultimate power. It does not exhaust you. It does not expose you to emotional vulnerability. It runs without supervision because it is not personal. It is structural. Build the structure. Install the system. Then let it work while you focus elsewhere. The dark mirror. This path is not comfortable. You should know that plainly. The man who decides to stop being managed by others does not immediately step into warmth and belonging. He steps into a temporary exile. He watches the crowd continue their patterns and realizes he can no longer participate in them without betraying what he now knows. He becomes the wolf who understands he cannot rejoin the flock, not because the flock rejected him, but because he has changed in ways that make the return impossible. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in exactly this condition. Stripped of the only career he had ever known, tortured, exiled to his rural estate with nothing but his books and his mind. He had no power. He had lost his position, his income, his standing. And from that void, from that precise moment of total defeat, he wrote the work that shaped political thought for 5 centuries. The exile was not the end of his power. It was the incubation of his most dangerous thinking. This freedom, the freedom of the man who no longer needs the crown's approval to feel real, is cold. It is solitary. There are moments it will feel like loss, but it is the only freedom that is truly yours. You made it to the end. That separates you from the majority who need comfort more than truth. Subscribe, not because this is a request. Subscribe because you have decided you are done being managed by people who understood these principles while you were told to be nice. What I have shared here is the surface layer. There is a deeper curriculum, patterns of influence, psychological architecture, and strategic frameworks that cannot be said publicly in this format without being stripped from the platform entirely. If that is the path you are choosing, you know where to find it. The dangerous ones always do.